The honourable member for Essex.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm proud to rise as the member for Essex on our NDP motion today. I want to thank the member for Victoria for his hard work. And this motion today asks the members of the House to call on the Prime Minister to waive solicitor-client privilege for the former Attorney General with respect to allegations of interference in the prosecution of SNC Lavelin and to urge the government to launch a public inquiry into this scandal. It's important to repeat because so many people in Essex have been asking me about what is really happening here. They deserve answers, and this motion seeks to find them. It's been quite a week in the wake of reports alleging the Prime Minister or senior staff in the PMO pressured the former Attorney General to interfere with the decision of the Public Prosecution Service to deny SNC Lavelin a deferred prosecution agreement for charges of corruption and fraud relating to bribes paid to officials in Gaddafi's Libya between 2001 and 2011. This saga has played out in national headlines, and the bombshells just keep coming this week as the story grew every day, becoming more bizarre and unbelievable. Canadians now have every reason to believe that this PM fired Canada's first Indigenous Justice Minister for speaking truth to power because she would not shield alleged corporate criminals at SNC Lavelin. This was followed by her quitting her current cabinet post and quickly seeking legal counsel. What has ensued is a story that's changing faster, Mr. Speaker, than my kids when they get in trouble and are trying to get out of it. The Liberal Party can't keep their story straight. The PM has denied these allegations and pointed to the former Justice Minister's continued presence in Cabinet as evidence that nothing has happened, which begs the question, why did she resign and seek legal advice? To Canadians, this is a clear case of the Liberal government showing who really matters to them. It's not GM workers in Oshawa or Sears workers across our country or postal workers who were forced back to work by them. They compromise the independence of the justice system to bail out their corporate friends from serious criminal charges of fraud and corruption. Liberals, like Conservatives before them, used an omnibus bill, a monster legislative tool to jam things into one single vote. This is an erosion of our democracy, and New Democrats have been consistently critical of this blunt tool. I have never heard a government member cite the deferred prosecution agreement as a piece of the omnibus legislation, nor have I ever, been supportive of these being used because these are undemocratic tools. And now we find out exactly why SNC Lavelin had 50+ meetings with the PMO and related ministers. So continuing on the theme that there's nothing to see here, we move on from all the good corporate goodies that were buried in a Liberal omnibus bill to the discovery that not only was SNC Lavelin rewarded for their endless lobbying efforts by creating a piece of legislation that would let them get off any charges without going to court and getting their due, but instead asking the government just to write them a parking ticket and let them walk away. I would ask Canadians watching this at home, aren't you tired of watching these two parties write rules for corporations while you are forced to play by the rules and be held accountable? That's what I'm hearing from my constituents, Mr. Speaker. They're tired. How many Canadians do I meet, and all of us, who are looking for legislation to help their families and loved ones? Lyme disease patients, seniors, people who can't afford their housing or their medication would give their eye teeth to get one meeting with the Prime Minister to let him know how broken our systems are and how much Canadians are suffering. But they can't get into the PM. They can't get into that office, but SNC Lavelin, a construction firm, can get endless meetings in order to change the rules so they can break the law without any consequences. Canadians are tired of having two sets of rules, one for corporations and the rich and another for everyday people. But that isn't even the worst of it, or the reason why we all watch this play out this week. Because we need to be clear that SNC Lavelin got their get-out-of-jail-free card from the Liberals in the omnibus budget bill, but that wasn't enough for them. They had the free card, but they were itching to use it. They wasted no time in lining up to be the first to use their shiny new legislation. They submitted to have their case put under deferred prosecution, and that is where the allegations begin. Allegations of pressure from the PMO on the Attorney General and her team to accept their submission. And this is where it starts to get shady. In case Canadians didn't think it was already shady, I'll repeat. The AG alleges that she felt pressured to accept the deferred prosecution agreement and let SNC Lavelin avoid a criminal trial. And she didn't want to. This is the root of why we are here today and why we need the truth and to hear from the former Justice Minister herself. There has been a lot of worry about what this investigation would mean for workers at SNC Lavelin here at home in Canada. I share that worry, how it might hurt them and their communities. In all of this sordid affair, it is once again working people who are stuck between a corrupt company who wants to skirt the rules and the worry over their jobs to keep their families thriving. This is unfair, Mr. Speaker. As the story keeps changing day after day, at times blaming the previous Justice Minister after her resignation, implying that it could be because she doesn't speak French. Or maybe it could be because Mr. Bryson resigned. All the while, we witness an ugly whisper campaign that is waged on her personally. And we saw this play out on social media. And I hope, Mr. Speaker, that this campaign did not come from people that were sitting with her on that side of the government. I hope that they were not spreading this misinformation about her in a way to discredit her from speaking up as she should be on behalf of all Canadians. Then we find ourselves at the Justice Committee where the member for Skeena-Bulkley Valley represented the New Democrats well. He brought reasonable amendments to the government motion to invite the former Justice Minister, Jerry Butts and Matthew Bouchard, to appear before them as witnesses, which were struck down by the Liberal members on the committee. These Liberal committee members are stonewalling and making a parliamentary committee unworkable. And I echo the member from Victoria as he heads into that committee today as vice chair for our party, that he's hopeful that today they will revisit that today there will be a conversation about bringing folks in the room who were involved in this directly to that committee. I do hope that happens today, Mr. Speaker. You know, these are individuals who hold the truth. But unfortunately at that meeting, the Liberal committee members voted against these witnesses, trying to deflect onto the piece of legislation that they changed and its validity, instead of what they should be focusing on, what was said by who and when to the former Attorney General. Canadians expect their government to work for them, and that is what New Democrats are committed to doing. That is why we are calling for an independent public inquiry into the PM's SNC Lavelin scandal to provide answers. And we are calling on the Prime Minister to waive solicitor-client privilege for the former Attorney General to let her speak her truth to power publicly. The NDP has also called on the Ethics Commissioner to investigate, which we are thankful has been accepted. This won't be the first time that the Ethics Commissioner investigates our Prime Minister. It's the 5th time, Mr. Speaker. And even when he has been found in breach of ethics twice, there are limited tools that the Ethics Commissioner has to hold the Prime Minister and this government to account. And the government members who are getting up today saying it's good enough that the Ethics Commissioner is investigating know this very well. They know there will be no consequences if it is indeed found that there's a breach of ethics. And it's a long process, and we need this to be cleared now. If Liberals truly have nothing to hide, then this will be an easy vote. Supporting our motion today will signal to Canadians that Liberals will stand with New Democrats and the opposition members in wanting the truth to come to the light of day. The Liberals keep telling us how important an independent justice system is, but it all goes out the window when it's their friends in trouble. The Attorney General cannot be pressured by the Prime Minister. This allegation is an erosion of trust in a pillar of Canadian democracy. The need for a public inquiry is clear. Canadians deserve a government that they can trust. Liberals have an opportunity here to end the speculation that is playing out in our headlines and support the truth being set free.
Questions and comments. The Honourable Member for Parkdale High Park.
So one comment and one question for my friend opposite, the member from Essex. She talked about the transparency of the process and labeling the lamenting the fact that there wasn't enough transparency from her perspective. What I would put out there is simple 5 points for the purposes of this debate. There was a 1-year consultation process on remediation agreements. The remediation agreements were flagged in the budget. They were implemented in the budget implementation bill. That bill was then studied in 3 parliamentary committees, Justice, Finance, in the House of Commons, and in the Senate, and then the matter was gazetted. With respect to my friend opposite, I know she is concerned about trade. I know she is also concerned about fairness for workers. What I would put to her is that in a context where you have now 5 members of the G7 with whom we trade who have implemented remediation agreements, in the context where you have a mechanism to give prosecutors additional tools with which to use on how they proceed so that they can hold corporate leaders responsible, including admissions of guilt, fines, penalties, and forfeiture, and not directly impact the livelihoods of the workers that she advocates for in this chamber, as does her party. Is that a useful tool, one, for harmonizing our relationship with our other trading partners, and secondly, for ensuring that the livelihoods of the workers in the province of Quebec and throughout Canada are not disproportionately impacted?
The honourable member for Essex.
I would be happy to have that conversation on another day, Mr. Speaker, because today the motion before us is about whether or not the Prime Minister will waive the privilege and whether or not there will be an independent inquiry. That is why we are here today. We are not here to debate the merits of this piece that was brought in, although I raised it in my speech, Mr. Speaker, because once again, it's being shoved down into a piece of legislation where Canadians don't see it, and it doesn't see the light of day for average Canadians. And I promise you, Mr. Speaker, if we head to Tim Hortons in Puce right now and we talk about these deferred abilities for corporations, Canadians have no idea about what is going on in legislation that is being rammed through by this government. But one question that they will all be asking in Tim Hortons today in Puce, Mr. Speaker, when will this government have an independent inquiry into these allegations?
Questions and comments. The honourable member for Sherwood Park, Port Saskatchewan.
Speaker, you know, it is striking that the government today only wants to talk about remediation agreements, and they didn't want to talk about it at all in the past. They want to talk about it today only because it is less politically damaging, they feel, than the actual substance of the motion which we need to be discussing. So I wonder if the member can just emphasize again the importance of allowing the former Attorney General to share her perspective. How about her perspective on this particular policy issue, but more fundamentally, what happened, what was said to whom, when, about the possibility of SNC Lavelin getting a special deal. I wonder if the member has comments on really the fact the government doesn't want to address that issue today, and how important it is from the perspective of the public interest for us to be able to hear what she has to say, and for the public to be able to come to their own conclusions about this.
Honourable member for Essex.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank my colleague for his question. And he's right that today from the government we've heard either discussions about remediation or we've heard discussions that are quite legal in nature, breaking down the attorney-solicitor privilege, client privilege. Neither of these things answer the fundamental question of why we cannot have an independent inquiry. That is the root of why we're here today. And so I agree with him that this is the most important piece. The one person who can shed light on all of this is the former Attorney General and Justice Minister. And when she is given that ability to do so, the truth will come out. You know, we've seen not only her stunning resignation, but then the stunning resignation of the Principal Secretary, a very long-time friend and strategist in the Liberal Party, which, you know, to people, again, in my riding of Essex, where there's smoke, there's fire. I mean, people don't resign from positions in political life that have been their entire career because there's nothing happening here. So there's a simple solution. It's time to bring it to the light of day and for the Liberals to vote with our motion along with the opposition, and let's get down to the bottom of what has really happened here.
Hear, hear.